Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect podcast brought to you by WinBet. I'm your host, James Anderson, and got a really special guest this week, Craig Mish of Sports Grid, where he hosts daily. Craig is, as plugged in as anyone on the Marlins. And I mean, if you were following his work, you would have been all over Trevor Rogers last year. And I think the Marlins, part of why I wanted to have Craig on is he's just really great at this and really good at what he does, but also just the Marlins are about as fun a team for me to kind of talk about. I always seem to be just super high on a few of their young big leaguers, and then they've got a ton of exciting guys in the farm system as well. So really excited you could join me, Craig. How you doing?
I'm doing good, James. Great to be with you as always, and appreciate the kind words. No doubt, it's kind of funny that I still have a first love for fantasy, but it's sort of like I'm transitioning to doing so many other different things that fantasy for at least 2022. I mean, I wouldn't say it's on the back burner for me because it never is, and I still play it and I still love it. But with just so many other things that I have going on, with covering the Marlins and with Sports Grid and two shows that I'm doing now for them, it's sort of like it's nice to sit back and have like a fantasy future conversation, which I don't get to have that often anymore.
Well, no, I mean you're great at it, man. You're great at wearing multiple hats, and congrats on the new gig, by the way.
Thank you.
Very very cool. Uh, so let's just jump right in here. There's so many exciting players in this organization, majors and minors. The one that I think I've probably talked the most about this offseason is Jazz Chisholm, who
Hmm.
is a very divisive player for fantasy because you kind of either see maybe another level there, or you sort of see the plate skills from last year and see some significant downside with Jazz. Where do you sort of stand on him in terms of whether there is another level there that he will reach in the near future, or whether he kind of is what he is at this point?
It's probably one of the more complicated players I think in all of Major League Baseball, because I think that his skill set speaks to maybe a top 10 player in fantasy, top 20 player in Major League Baseball. I mean, all those things are definitely possible. But there's a lot that comes with Jazz Chisholm. Like Jazz knows who he is, James, and that there's an element to me with that I wonder. As far as keeping him grounded, still a young kid, extremely fun on the field, immensely talented. But we saw this already in the first week of the season. The Marlins decided to bat him at the bottom of the lineup, and then they took him out after the first game, and he went to social media and showed some immaturity. I think with all of that, I think that you could make the case that he was correct, and you could make the case that Don Mattingly was incorrect by putting him where he has in the lineup. I think all those things are fair, James. But you work for somebody, and I work for somebody too, and in the end, you just got to handle those things, I think, privately. And that's part of this, that's part of this player. It's just the nature of who it is. I think the Marlins knew that when they acquired him from Arizona. And can he hit another 20 home runs in a season? Of course. Can he steal another 20 bases potentially in a season? Of course. The swing and miss is always going to be there for him, just given the nature of the uppercut swing that he has. When he makes contact, it goes a long way. When he doesn't, it looks like a really long swing, and people complain about him. So naturally, I think there's a ton of more upside there. Future for fantasy still very much to be determined. Miami's off to this slow start now, so you got to kind of wonder how long they're going to be batting him at the bottom of the lineup. But James, as you know, if he's batting eighth or ninth in a lineup and doesn't play every day, I think he'll play mostly every day. I think it's overblown about him missing just that one game. I think he's in the lineup virtually every day. But plate appearances are going to be a lot more limited for a player like him if he's batting eighth or ninth, and especially against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, I was surprised that he kind of reacted the way he did to the what happened earlier in the season. He's obviously very confident in himself, but I mean there is sort of an element of being a good teammate as well. And if he performs up to his expectations, he'll play as much as he wants. He'll hit high in the lineup.
Absolutely.
I was a little surprised by that, but I think his talent. I mean, the reason they went and got him for Zach Gallen was because they didn't have a position player in their system at that time with his type of upside, and they had a ton of pitchers. So, um, yeah, hopefully they kind of let this play out. What do you think the relationship is like between him and Don Mattingly? Obviously, easy to kind of see, like from the outside, it might look like it's a little rocky. Um, Don's old school, Jazz is about as new school as it gets. How
Right.
do you think their relationship is?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Donnie's really good with the young kids. He, calls them all like his sons. I personally don't think there's any issue there. But Donnie even said it before the season. I think if I'm not mistaken, Jazz crashed like one of like the media sessions that Donnie was at very early on in spring training. And somebody asked a question about him, and Donnie said, I'm not interested in the blue hair anymore and the chains and whatever. And I think that caught some people by surprise that he said that. But I will say that as old school as Donnie is, he does have the new school bones in him. I don't want to, put that on him because I really don't feel like he is that way. But I think that what Jazz is going to have to understand at some point, and it's very hard to do, is like baseball more than any of the others, James. We see this in the NBA, and I think that that's the problem that maybe some people have. Like a lot of people rush to Jazz's defense. Why can't he pop off? Why can't he say where he wants to play? Why can't he not want to be in the lineup? I think all those things are true, but more so, I think personally in baseball than in the NBA, then in the NHL, then in the NFL, where we see all this drama. This guy wants to leave, and this guy says he doesn't like this guy, and this guy won't play for this coach. Baseball is so much a team sport. It is really I mean, to me, they call football really, but it's such a quarterback sport at this point. Let's be honest, in the NFL, baseball's like one guy is in general not going to win games for you unless his name is Otani, right? Because he does both. He's a pitcher and the hitter. So Jazz can be everything that he is on the field and be this dynamic, unbelievable offensive and defensive player, but he's got to chill out a little bit with the non-baseball stuff and just go out there and be himself and do the things that he does. And no one's muting him, and no one's telling him to stop talking and stop doing his Euro step or dance around a bat flip. Do all of those things. But I mean, James, well, you can't basically like and retweet things that says negative things about your own manager. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just, and especially Don Mattingly too,
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, to me, Mattingly can handle that. It's just more like kind of, like there's a lot of guys on this roster. It's a pretty talented roster to me. I mean, you're gonna want to just give other guys, a start here and there. Like it doesn't have to be you're starting 162 games type of thing. I mean, you can start 150 games and
That's what it's going to be.
right.
Everyone's so worried, James. He's going to start 150 games if he's healthy. I mean, we'll get a day off once every 2 weeks. It was so much about nothing, but this is sort of the deal with Jazz, who I like very much and I communicate with a lot. But you know, just play the game, have fun, do whatever you want, but don't dismerit Donnie. I mean, come on, of all
So,
people.
so another Marlins hitter who I was very high on this past offseason was Jesus Sanchez, who had a big game a couple days ago. Just love his power potential. They seem to really like him.
Yeah.
What do you think Jesus Sanchez's numbers look like at the end of this year?
I don't know. I think he'll have the most home runs per plate appearance on the Marlins this season. But James, I just don't see him staying healthy for the entire season. I don't. I don't think he's a center fielder. I think he can play the position. He has had lower body and lower leg issues ever since he came up through the minors with Tampa Bay, and I think Miami's idea in terms of his sprint speed and some of the advanced metrics that show that he could play center field. I think that is accurate, but he's a corner outfielder and he's going to be doing a lot of running out there. I am concerned. I don't think that he holds up the whole season. We already saw almost an injury. He ran into the wall. He was sort of grabbing his groin a little bit, but the power is immense. If I had to guess at the end of the season, if you said to me, home runs per plate appearance, who leads the Marlins, it will be him. I could not project 500 plate appearances for this player. He has not gotten there. He's been banged up for different issues over the course of years. But you're right. There's a ton of high upside there. Has a little trouble with the high fastball, especially against lefties. But in essence, between 20 and 30 home runs is fair. But James, I think he's going to be that guy that's going to do that in 400 plate appearances. That's someone in fantasy baseball next year is going to draft saying, well, if he only gets to 500, imagine how many he can hit. And I don't think he's ever going to be that guy playing center field. I don't think that can happen.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I did think it was sort of weird that they constructed the roster this way, where they
Mhm.
almost like you see other teams do this, where you kind of pushing guys into positions that you might be asking too much of them, and it almost never works. Like that whole idea, like it seems like the Reds are always doing that with guys, and like the White Sox kind of doing that with like Andrew Vaughn and stuff.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just never seems to really work. So I was
No.
a little bit surprised by that. Like they have this really special hitting talent, and then they go sign two other corner outfielders. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting take. So
It is, and I'll tell you, in talking to players just like around the league, like I think that it's a good assessment for people, especially for the future of fantasy too, is that it's sometimes it's really difficult. And James, you've been following baseball for a long time, like I have. We always want to compare players to other players, and I think that makes us comfortable with assessments on our players when we're drafting and we're scouting and we're looking at players over the course of the season. And that's why players like, as an example, roundabout way of answering, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Ryan Mountcastle. There's a reason why those big dudes don't play the outfield, James. Like there's a reason, because they keep getting hurt. That no one looks like those players in the outfield, and no one looks like Jesus Sanchez in center field. It's just not the prototypical guy. What happens when players are miscast and put in different positions? They get hurt. And Sanchez has already had that history to a degree. So when I see like the biggest outfielder to me in baseball, not history necessarily, but the one that always stands out to me was Jose Canseco, because Jose Canseco just didn't look the part of an outfielder. And his body, I mean, obviously his body broke down for a lot of other reasons, but he started falling apart. He couldn't play the outfield anymore. And that's why at some point Yankees just have to admit it. They got two DHs on the team. The Orioles finally figured that out real quick with Mountcastle. I think he came up a third or outfield or whatever it was. And the Marlins, unfortunately, are going to find out the hard way if they're trying to play Sanchez, I think, all season in center.
so speaking of two DHs, I mean, I think at least my read on things is like their best hitters are in no particular order. Uh, Jesus Aguilar, Jorge Soler, Jesus Sanchez, Affacile Garcia, Garrett Cooper. Uh, Maybe Jazz can kind of join those guys.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think there's room for all those guys to sort of get what would amount to near everyday playing time when they're healthy? Or do you see any of those guys as being more kind of 4 to 5 days a week type of guys that might not be as useful in weekly leagues?
Well, with Cooper and Aguilar, it's a pretty simple 50-50 split at first base and DH. And so provided that they deliver on the numbers that they've delivered previously per plate appearance, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't change. Early on in the season, we've already seen Avicel Garcia, who they signed to a pretty significant extension for them, free agent contract for them, 4 years, 45 million. That's big in Marlins terms, of course.
Mm.
Already has missed 2 games. So it remains to be seen. They say he's healthy, and so we'll find out what he looks like this weekend. And in terms of Soler, he actually, James, has looked pretty good in left field. He made a
Huh.
catch up against the wall and ran in to make a catch too. And I know when we're looking at box scores, we don't necessarily look at that. So I think that he can play the solid position of left field. And so with him in left, Garcia in right, who by the way is not a center fielder either, and then Sanchez in center, to me, that's where most of the time will play when they are healthy. The other player that's played quite a bit outfield early on in the season, I think to the surprise of most, even with him playing a little in spring training, is Brian Anderson. It's like he's moved almost exclusively to this super utility type, and he has struggled in a really big way adjusting to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's he's been kind of trending down a little bit
A lot.
over the last couple of years. Yeah. How's Joey Wendell looked really quickly?
He looks great. And when they got him, I think the idea was to consider playing him every day. They took him into the spring. He looked fantastic. He's actually the guy that if they do look, we're still so early into this thing, but the early results on the lineup have been pretty miserable. If they do decide to switch things up and they played Wendell, they batted him first or second against righties the rest of the season and just plugged them in at third, I wouldn't be surprised. They have to figure out something, James, with Brian Anderson, because 2 years ago, this is a player that you looked at and thought long-term extension, hot corner, gold glove, and then, a couple of injuries. And wow, he has fallen out of favor big time. His at-bats have looked awful in this early part of the season. So if they were to part with Anderson in some way at some point this season and sort of hand back over super utility to John Birdie and maybe get somebody else, an arm or something else, boy, that would just pencil in Wendell every single day. But I think between Wendell and Anderson, Wendell gets at least 20% more plate appearances over the course of the season.
That's very good to know. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about this really exciting pitching staff. But first, a message from our sponsors. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 9 states: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. Register for WynnBET today, make a qualifying deposit, and wager to receive $200 in free bets. Promotion may vary by state. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. All right, we're back. Craig, the talk of the radio show I did today was Jesus Luzardo. Man, he looked he looked better than I thought he was going to look in any start this season, and that was his first start of the season. Like, how blown away were you by that performance, and how do you envision his season unfolding here?
Yeah, the organization is so bullish on Jesus Luzardo, and he's probably the one divisive figure that I have, sort of battled with people in the organization, because when they made that trade last year and they acquired him, James, look, first of all, I thought Miami should have extended Starling Marte, and they didn't. And then they go out and they get Luzardo, and let's be honest, they didn't need Jesus Luzardo. They needed a hitter, like they needed some bats. They didn't do it. So, I mean, I wouldn't say, James, that I clowned them, but I was very critical of that trade, just because the adage is you can never have enough pitching. But in this case, I thought the Marlins had enough pitching. And then Luzardo comes out last year and is just skipping balls 54 feet. Like, it looks so bad. And you know what happened this offseason? You couldn't really train with your coaches, but they had these like pseudo workouts amongst players. And I'm keeping in touch with all these guys, James, so, and they're all like, Luzardo looks really good and he looks different and he looks sharp. I'm like, all right, you say so. Spring comes, we see the same thing. He looks good again. I saw 2 of his starts in person, and I'm getting the text. I told you, Luzardo. I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna wait till the regular season on this one. Listen, I already bought your Isan Diaz and Monte Harrison. I gotta wait this out on Luzardo, right? Like, I'm not going down this road again on every guy you tell me is gonna be good. I'm not gonna do that. But I mean, come on, the results yesterday were insane. Now, listen, I am not taking away anything from Jesus. I'm not going to do that. 12 strikeouts, 5 innings pitched, as good of a 5th starting performance of any player in baseball this season, unequivocally. Now, one thing I did not realize was, apparently, and this is no shade, no pun intended, on Luzardo, but apparently the hitters couldn't see anything yesterday because of the shadows in Anaheim for about 4 innings. That's what I heard. So, is that me just still not being bullish and not willing to just take my L on Luzardo, or should I just say he's great and just move on? I'm gonna want to see more, James. I'm gonna want to see a little bit more from him. The results were incredible. It's the best I've ever seen him look. It's Ohtani, it's Trout. He got those guys out, but I want a little more. I want Phillies on Sunday, James. Like, I want to, or Cardinals next week. I want to see him do it a couple times, and then certainly I can get back to you with a better result. So I don't know if I'm a denier or a doubter, but when he came up last year to Miami, his ERA was like 10 after 3, so he just couldn't get anybody out, but he looks like a different guy.
Yeah, Jeff Erickson made this point on the XM show today that those Anaheim getaway games are always just great for the starting pitchers involved. So I think, it might be a case of, the people that drafted Jesus Luzardo, you nailed that pick, but at the same time, maybe if you have Jesus Luzardo in a dynasty league or something like that, you now might be the time to sort of sniff around on what you could get for him. There's also just the durability concerns that have been sort of longstanding
Yeah.
with him. So, I hope I hope we get 15, 20 more starts, kind of that same caliber of bat missing stuff. But you're right. I mean, it is early, and there are some contextual issues with fully buying in on that performance. But
Yeah, I would say that if you watch, and he didn't do it yesterday, but he did it in the spring a couple times. If you watch him, and his tell for me, his easy poker tell for me, is when James. It sounds crazy, but when he is skipping balls 3 feet in front of home plate, he's got nothing that day. Like you just know something is up with him. I saw that a couple times, and that's when you see Mel Stottlemyre go to the mound. They refocus him and get him going. He seems like he's in his head a little bit. Look, again, is he better than their fourth starter? Eliezer Hernandez is probably not saying very much. Eliezer probably is the 5 on their team anyway. They're just splitting up lefties with Rogers being the 3. But it could be something for the future. He was one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball. I am still a little skeptical. I want to see a little bit more, and maybe I'll just be the low man on this one, and I'll be wrong, which I've been wrong many times before on. But I want to see a couple more from him.
So let's quickly talk about the top 3 guys in that rotation. Is there anything about Sandy Alcantara, Trevor Rogers, Pablo Lopez that the fantasy community might not know that you are kind of privy to, that you think is relevant about
Sure.
either of those 3 heading into the year?
Yeah, nothing with Sandy. Sandy's 100% healthy, as happy as he's ever been, coming off, setting his family up for life, plus $55 million contract. I think he throws 7 innings I mean, with the exception of his first start, and maybe who knows in Philadelphia this week against Philadelphia, but a 7, 8 inning guy every time. Nothing new to know there. Trevor Rogers did not work out with the team this offseason, spent most of his time, I believe, in New Mexico. But I see no reason why the success that he had can't continue. And I think with Pablo Lopez, it's the obvious at this point with him, which is you draft Pablo Lopez in fantasy, and 8 games in, he's top 3 in ERA, top 2 in strikeouts, top 5 in WHIP, and you think you got the best pick in the draft. And then a month later, he's hurt and he misses 2 months. So I don't know, James. Like this is a recurring shoulder issue that he's had in the past. I talked to him in spring training. He said he's healthier, he's stronger. He didn't say it wasn't going to happen again, but he's been shut down, James. I believe 3 of the last 4 years with the same issue. So I have to be in the June sell high on Pablo, no matter how good he's looked, because that's the hard part about fantasy. It's like when Noah Syndergaard was going so good in the past. It's like, how do you trade a guy like that? But you knew the shoe was going to drop at some point. So if you got out from under that at his peak, you probably did well in a deal. To me, that's the same thing with Lopez. If he makes 30 starts, he could be the best pitcher in their rotation. He just has yet to do it. So do I go by track record here of things that have happened, or things that are not really projectable? That would be my opinion on Pablo.
Yeah, I mean, been rostering Pablo Lopez for many years, and I can definitely attest to if I'd sold him in late May every year, I would not have regretted it.
Yeah.
So, what's your read on the closer situation now and when Dylan Floro is healthy?
So Anthony Bender blew his first save opportunity. He almost blew the next one. I think that for people who are just looking at the stats and not the games, in the game that he got the save, he put a runner on, and then Brandon Crawford was at the plate of San Francisco. And I guess Gabe Kapler is very aggressive, James, on things that I'm not aware of, but on a absolute ball for Crawford swung at a 3-0 to make it strike 1, and he went out and then he hit into a double play. Game ended, and Bender got the save. I think if Crawford walks, he blows that one too, and Miami doesn't have a win. The other night, he ended up in a tie game, ended up getting loss. I still think he's their highest upside pitcher, but he's always 1 or 2 pitches away, James, from a wild pitch, from a blown save. And knowing the way that Mattingly and Mel are, I don't know that he fits their profile for a closer. I really don't. So Floro is not ready. I think that you probably will see him sometime in May. He hasn't pitched in any minor league games yet, so that's the first indication. Once you see him do a rehab game, he's probably 2 games away. So my guess is first week of the month, maybe of May, or maybe late April. And there's a chance that they put Floro back in that role and put Bender in the middle inning role. Sulcer's looked fantastic for them, so that's clearly another option as a possibility. He saved games last year with Baltimore, but they really don't have the prototypical closer. The only thing that we know about Miami and we know about Mattingly is that unlike these teams that say it's closer by committee, with Miami, it never is. He picks one guy and he rides that guy to the end. So Anthony Bass is there. He got some save opportunities last year. He didn't end up closing any. They just don't have the guy, James. I don't know that they're gonna have the guy, but Floro and Bender to me are the ones. And to be honest with you, James, I don't even think Floro really fits the bill as a closer either. They just don't have that ninth inning back end guy this year.
Huh, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I bet there's probably some leagues where Bender, Sulcer, and Floro are all rostered, and people are just kind of hoping one rises to the top. But that's good info on that Bender save you referenced. Where
It's
he,
you know what it reminds me of a little bit? It's like kind of like Colorado situation in a way where you didn't know who the closer was going to be, but if you did the smart thing, you just tried to figure out who the guy was going to be when Bard blew his first save. Like that to me was the way to go with Miami. So if you didn't want to pay the price for Bender possibly being the closer, pay the price on Sulcer and pay that little price on Floro and stash him till inevitably Bender loses the gig. And that's not an indication that Bard is going to lose the gig. But look, they brought in that other guy, Godot. He looked fantastic. Who knows? Maybe that's a new closer in Colorado. So it's like sometimes the backup quarterback is more popular than the starter. I think that's Miami's deal in this case.
all right, the Marlins have a extremely exciting farm system, and we're going to talk about some of those guys in a second. But another message from our sponsors: bet against others with no fees involved. That's right, no pesky hidden fees to ruin your day. Better Edge is a social betting marketplace where there's no fee on each transaction. Better Edge is a social betting marketplace, and chances are it's legal in your state. We bring betting back to its social roots where you can like, comment, and challenge other users all within the app. Play without getting played at Better Edge. Go to betteredge.com. That's bettoredge.com to sign up today. All right, Craig. Khalil Watson he's now ranked as my top prospect for fantasy from that entire draft class. His tools are obviously just off the charts. What have been your takeaways so far on Khalil Watson, and how high are the Marlins on him?
Yeah, this is a potential superstar in the making. The comparisons that I've heard are, I mean, I've heard a lot, but Jimmy Rollins is the one that really comes to mind here. And I don't know that Khalil's going to be a shortstop, second baseman, center field long term. I'm not really sure. The background here, James, is of course he slid in the draft a little bit, and there's just sort of some questions as to why that happened. Miami had a hard time signing him and getting him to come out of high school and get him into a Marlins minor league uniform, and he has absolutely looked the part in the minor league games that he's played in spring training, and talent is not an issue for this kid. But James, he's very young, and naturally with very young players, you just don't know which way they're going to go. I don't know if you saw this, but the other day in a game, he hit a home run, and then his next at bat, he grounded out through the bat. I'm not really sure what happened in that spot. They pulled him out of the game. Not unusual, I think, for a young kid that's having his first slice of pro ball. But this is just something to watch with a player like this as well. I mean, I don't know of any background stuff there, but any player like that starts off like that, you just got to kind of keep an eye on. I know Miami just wants to keep him on this path because of the talent level. He should have been probably the number one overall pick in that draft. But yeah, James, dynasty wise, position player wise, you probably would know a little bit more about the player pool than me. But from Miami's perspective, yeah, there's no doubt that he's their best offensive minor league prospect without question in their system.
Yeah, I know there were some rumors about some background stuff on him before the draft, but and there's also just this big movement among a lot of teams, most teams really, to kind of go after college guys more and more. So, I mean, when you're talking about a guy where you're maybe not, fully sure on the makeup, and he's going to be 3-4 years away, I think some teams were just hesitant to pull the trigger. But I mean, if he can just be, the guy that we've seen, and from a talent standpoint, he could make a lot of teams regret passing on him. A guy that not many teams got the opportunity to pass on is Max Meyer. And I mean, I'm sure you're just going to be getting questions until it happens. Like, when's Max Meyer going to be up?
Sure.
I mean, I assume that basically just has way more to do with the 5 guys in the big league rotation than Meyer himself. But would you say he is the de facto 6th starter at the moment?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, no. Interestingly enough, I think that the Marlins are gonna. First of all, I think he's probably ready now, but I think the Marlins may have him pitch 2 months
Oh,
solid in the minor leagues before they call him up. And by the way, I don't think this is like a service time thing at all. I think they just want him to be at his peak when he comes to the majors. But I know this is going to sound crazy, and not a lot of people are going to want to hear this. But let's be honest, James. They paid Braxton Garrett a lot of money when they took him in the first round several years ago.
mm-hmm.
And I think in their heart of hearts they know Meyer has a higher ceiling than Garrett, but they'd probably like Garrett to earn a little of that dough and come to the big leagues. He did have one really good start last year against San Diego, did Garrett, and I think he's the first one. I do. I think if something was to happen to anyone in the rotation, I think Garrett would get the first crack. After that, yes, it would make sense that Meyer is next. Let's also not forget about Edward Cabrera right now, who is hurt, but I don't think it's that serious. It's just a buildup back because he arrived late to spring training because of visa issues. But I could talk about Max Meyer all day. He's an interesting character. I've gotten to know him a little bit. This is a really, really tough-minded, want to strike you out every time individual. Feels like he can pitch in the big leagues right now. Do you want to be a starter? Sure. Reliever? Sure. Mop-up man? Sure. Doesn't care. Put me in the big leagues. I'll get you out through 5 perfect innings on Tuesday night. Forgot to drink water and electrolytes, James, before the game. Forgot. That's who this kid, just so zoned in. Knows now in the future I got to drink my Gatorade or Powerade before the game or I'm going to get a cramp. That's what happened. His foot cramped up. They're very lucky to have this kid. I can understand why Miami's been hesitant to trade him.
Yeah, he's a fellow Gopher, rare University of Minnesota product that could be a great big leaguer. Another guy that you had a tweet about, Uri Perez, a few weeks ago that went viral. Can you kind of elaborate on him and his potential and sort of how you see them handling him over the next year or so?
Well, he looks like he's on the fast track right now. They haven't held him back at all. He was the youngest player in baseball, I think, history to make a start at Double-A at his age. He's not Doc Gooden, James. He's not going to strike out 400 guys his first season at 19, but there's a legitimate chance he could be in the big leagues next year at 19 years old. I could see it, or 20, whatever. I definitely could see it happening. He's been unhittable basically at every single level. He's tall, lean, throws hard. We mentioned Syndergaard earlier in the show. That's kind of the comp for him, is just what Syndergaard was when he first came up. And by the way, wonderful character. I've gotten to know him a little bit too. Wonderful human. Understands, I think, what it takes. Has been taken under the wing by Sandy Alcantara a little bit, so he's on the right path there too. Unlike another one of their pitchers in the organization that used to be their number one prospect, pitching prospect. So those 3, James, and Edward Cabrera maybe a little bit on that outside, but those 3 that you just mentioned, to me, are far and away the Marlins' top prospects. Like, we can sit here and talk, and I can go over Jose Salas and Peyton Burdick and JJ Bleday and some of the others that they have, Zach McCambly, Jake Eater. They have a lot of others, trust me. But those 3, that's the tier. And then everyone else is a guess.
Yeah, that's a top three that I think a lot of orgs would love to have as their top three. You mentioned Uri's makeup a little bit. Like, I mean, you have to be pretty special to be able to pitch at the levels he's pitched at his age. A lot of guys are just so far behind where he is in terms of being able to handle that level of competition as starting pitchers. So just hope that hope that he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
We will hit on a couple of the other pitchers you've been alluding to here in a second. But first, a message from Vivid Seats. Baseball is back. That's right. An entire glorious season, all 162 games. And with live events resuming, you can actually be there to catch all the action in person with Vivid Seats. Every backdoor slider, every round tripper, and every doubleheader can be experienced live. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you can start earning free tickets from your very first purchase. Just buy, collect stamps, and redeem. It's that easy. From behind the dugout to upper level, Vivid Seats has you covered for all the games that matter to you. Pro tip, buy tickets with your whole group, split the bill, and make progress towards your free ticket even faster. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, life happens live. All right, Craig, you kind of alluded to Edward Cabrera a little bit. For me, it seems like he has pretty good makeup, and there's just some durability issues that have kind of popped up here and there. And then with Sixto Sanchez, maybe not so great a makeup and probably even more significant durability concerns. Is that kind of a fair characterization on those two guys?
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand. I think that's fair. And those two guys, were sort of buddy buddy over the last 2 years too. But look, Edward's a different guy. I'm not concerned with his character, with his makeup at all. And I am concerned a little with these nagging injuries that he's had, and wondering, James, like, are these real injuries? Are they soreness? It's because nothing has ever seemed to be serious with him. It's just like these little things just have kept popping up. But with Edward, I know this is going to sound strange, but with Edward, I kind of think like Miami wants to get him healthy so they could trade him.
Mm,
Not because they don't like him, but it's just they like the others so much. They like
right.
Edward too, but inevitably, James, they're got to trade for some hitting on this team and some long-term sustainability as far as depth. And a lot of teams really like Edward Cabrera. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's a long-term Marlin. If he is, he's in the rotation. He's probably better than, to me, the two back guys that they have. We'll see what Luzardo is. Eliezer Hernandez. I think Cabrera could easily be the 4 there, maybe even the 3. And if they were to trade Pablo Lopez or someone else, he could be the 2. No question, he's in it for the long haul. But injuries, yeah, I mean that's small injuries have been the thing with him. With Sixto Sanchez, I mean, is this like a complete give up done? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, we're almost there. I think. Like, I mean, he's not going to pitch for 2 years. It doesn't really take too well to the conditioning and the listening part of it. And I just don't know. I just don't know. I mean, he could resurface at some point. I think that there have been pitchers before. Like, I guess a good comp would be like James Kaprelian, maybe. Like, but not that he's a bad character guy or anything like that. Just like let's just use the injury. Like, pick pitcher A, James, that was top prospect, number 1 pitcher, Honeywell, right?
Yeah, I was going to say Honeywell, maybe.
Right, disappears for several years, and then all of a sudden now Sixto Sanchez on Pittsburgh is like throwing shutouts. Like, I think that's probably the best scenario. But I right now, for me to predict a pitch being thrown by him in the big leagues this season, I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, the red flags with him, I was just running away from him as fast as possible this offseason. Do you know at all like how that video got leaked of him
What of him
throwing?
throwing? He leaked it himself.
Yeah, he put that out on purpose.
He did it himself.
That's so crazy.
I mean, a video of what looks like training your little leaguers to throw on a field. Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen a player look that bad in a short clip like that. That was coming back from like an injury. I mean, that's just, I was so.
I don't think I've ever heard I don't think I've ever heard people in an organization have this much concern over the long-term future of a player than I've heard with him. So, it's.
Do you see with Edward Cabrera quick, like, could he, you kind of mentioned they don't really have a closer. Do you think he could maybe be the answer there, or is he just going to be developed as a starter or traded, one of those two?
I think starter.
Okay.
Yeah. The one interesting thing that they could do, and again, I don't know. It's been mentioned to me at least, and not by any like key decision, but I mean, could they decide Meyer as the closer for this year? Like, could they do that? Could they bring him up, have him be eighth, ninth inning guy for the rest of this season? Could they pull a Rays Matt Moore? Right? Could they pull a Wainwright? Could that happen for a year and then put him in the rotation? Alex Reyes. I don't know. I mean, I think that wherever you drafted him and wherever his fab value is now is for both reasons, for starter and maybe even for closer. So that's probably a long shot. But the other thing, James, too, with Meyer even being considered for like that kind of role is, James, wouldn't the Marlins have to be good for that to happen?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, like, if we look up in 2 months and this is a team that's, pushing on like an 85 win pace, then Max Meyer's stuff absolutely
Right.
plays in the ninth inning. I mean, his fastball slider combo, like, that's just elite ninth inning stuff right away. And you could kind of
Right.
still stretch him back out next year, and he could help the team win more games maybe in that role, but it wouldn't make any sense to do that if they're tracking on like a 76 win pace.
Yeah, that's the whole key, I think, with that.
So I think with JJ Bleday, there's a lot of really smart talent evaluators out there that are still in on Bleday. I think if he were not a top 4 pick, there wouldn't be this much optimism at all regarding him. He's basically just got that Arizona Fall League appearance to point to, other than his junior year at Vanderbilt. Um, are you, how sold are you? How sold is the team on him being, a true everyday player in the big leagues at some point?
Yeah, they're still bullish to the point where I think that this is going to be the key year for him. And then I could probably give you a lot more going into this conversation next year, but they're going to be very patient with him this year, let him get his full complement of at bats. There have been some videos and talk that he bulked up. I mean, I don't know, like hitting the ball harder. Is that the case? The early results say no, at least in the minor leagues. But I suppose the one thing, win or lose on JJ Bleday, and we don't know if it's a win or a loss for Miami. We're not even close to really knowing, I don't think, but he is older. So time is sort of running out for him to have that like uber prospect status. But I think, James, the question that you have to ask yourself, and I think Miami's probably saying this to themselves too, is that if they didn't take Bleday, James, the next team would have, or the next team after that, or the next team after that. So sometimes the luck factor does go into this. Inevitably, it is up to the player. But that draft that Miami saw with CJ Abrams and Riley Green and, some of these other players who were really coming on strong. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that they look at it and go, yeah, wow, maybe we should have done something else. But this is a full evaluation year for Bleday and Miami's system. And they've had a hard time developing hitters, James. There's no doubt that as great as they have been with pitching, they have been the opposite with hitting. They have not developed a hitter offensively. Jazz was in Arizona system. Jesus Sanchez was in Tampa Bay system. So if you want to give them 50% credit, fine. But they haven't, had a lot of development on the offensive side, and they're hoping Bleday is one that they do.
Yeah, that's kind of been, I mean, the team I follow most closely, the Brewers, that's been the story with them too. Excellent at developing pitching. All the hitting they have is kind of from outside the org for the most part. It's really interesting how teams can be so good at one and struggle with the other, but it also comes back to like which players you're selecting in the draft, and pretty much, it was consensus. It was Vaughn, Rutschman, Bleday were the 3 best college hitters in that class. You weren't going to get anyone saying they weren't. So
Right. And if Miami didn't take Bleday, how much further would he have fallen? 1 pick, 2 picks, 3 picks? So this is one for me that it seems more of the player than anything else. But look, you can indict Miami for offensive development in the minor league system at this point, because we've just yet to see it come to fruition.
Jose Salas and Ian Lewis are maybe my next 2 favorite of their hitting prospects. Actually, like them both more than Bleday, but they're further away.
Sure.
First of all, do you know why Ian Lewis is still back and extended? And then also, what have you kind of heard about those two, and are you high on either of them long term?
It's funny, somebody asked me about Lewis the other day. I have not done my due diligence. All it would require probably is a text, and then I could tell you. But I honestly have not even checked on Lewis, so I don't know. But look, I think Salas is a tier above even Lewis. I
Okay.
think Salas has a real, is a big kid, third base, shortstop, some serious pop, still seasoning in the minor leagues. But in that next tier of players that we would talk about in their system, that I included Eater, who's out for the year, and Zach McCambly, I think, is another pitcher that they value high. I think I put Salas in that tier as well.
Excellent. This has been really great, Craig. You're awesome at talking Marlins, awesome at kind of putting a fantasy spin on it, unlike a lot of beat reporters out there. So
where I come from, I will always
yeah,
have that.
of course.
I did a show for 10 years, talking, fantasy baseball every single day, and it was amazing run doing it with all the different hosts that I had, and being sandwiched in between RotoWire either before or after for 10 years. But look, I love fantasy baseball. I still love the game so much, but life changes. You have to sort of adjust with what's going to pay the bills. And if there was, and by the way, I do a fantasy show on Sports Grid every single day for an hour. But then the nature of fantasy baseball has expanded so much into daily, into wagering and everything else, that it's become something that I still love, and I enjoy these conversations like the one that we're having. But I've expanded the horizons to make the paycheck work, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, you got to be following Craig at Craig Mish on Twitter. Anything else you want to plug before we
yeah, I have a new show on Sports Grid every day, 2 to 3 Eastern. It's called Newswire. It looks at the legalization of sports betting around the country. We bring in different panelists, experts to just talk about the expansion of that. And so in addition to my fantasy show, which I do every day, 11 a.m. Eastern, the Newswire show is every day at 2 o'clock Eastern. And, James, it's awesome always catching up with you. Love your insight on RotoWire and everything else that you do. And thanks so much again for having me. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. Pleasure was all mine. Good luck the rest of the year in your fantasy leagues. I know you still play in some, so good luck. And hopefully the Marlins are competitive enough where some of those things we talked about can come to fruition here.
Yeah, just stay relevant for until August, James. That's all I need. Yeah, that's really all I ask for.
If Max Meyer's getting saves in July, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
All right, this has been the RotoWire Prospect Podcast, brought to you by WinBet. I'll be back next week.